In 15 minutes time, put your hands up if you speak Turkish. Anyone in the room speak Turkish? Amazing. Put your hand up if you speak Spanish. Okay, good. Put your hand up if you speak Spanish and Turkish. All right. You are going to need an interpretation device. If there is not one on your seat, there will be interpretation devices towards the back of the room. In our plenary number 2, partly it will be in Turkish, partly it will be in Spanish, and partly it will be in English. So if you don't have an interpretation device, please make sure that you get one in the next minute or so you're not stuck when we go to plenary number 2. Good to see you after you've been refreshed for your coffee break. I'm going to have a conversation now that really reflects what we were talking about earlier. But I'm actually, you're going to have to actually just lower the volume just a little bit so everyone can hear. Are we ready? Yeah. All right, good. Vera Songwe is the chair and founder of Liquidity and Sustainability. It's going to be a hard, long 2 days if I can't say sustainability. And she's joining us live via the internet. Vera Songwe, hello.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
We hear you. You are like 10 foot tall and 20 foot wide on the video at the Preston Auditorium. It is so lovely to have you here. So, mobilizing finance is the theme for our 2 days of transforming transportation. Mobilizing finance for climate action, because transportation and us getting around and us getting goods around the world, that has an impact on the climate crisis. So that's why we're looking at finance. And Vera, earlier on today, one of the earlier conversations we had was, so where is this money that we've been promised? How do we get it? What would you say to that, Vera?
Thank you again, Femi. Thank you for those questions. Greetings to everybody in a familiar room. I'm sure they are friends and colleagues. And Annie, I don't know, you must be there somewhere. Fantastic job that WRI is doing as well in this space. Listen, I think there is finance. We know that. And looking at the data, actually, for 2023, we had the highest sort of new assets under management of any category going into the infrastructure and natural resource sector. So people are taking notice, people are moving, investment is happening in this space. And in the sort of transport space altogether, if transport were a country, they would be the 7th largest emitter of CO2 in the world. And hence it is important for us to be having this conversation. For the African continent in particular as well, we see that the service sector is a huge contributor to growth, and so also an important need for financing if we want to make sure that we can recover very quickly from the COVID crisis. So either way you look at it, transportation is important. Where is the financing? The big issue around the financing, of course, is around the cost of resources, how expensive it is to access financing because of the perception of risk in the emerging and developing market economies. Today, we need about $650 billion of external financing from the Songwe Stern Bhattacharya report to be able to tackle the transportation segment of the investments that are needed. The good news is that it's under mitigation. The good news is that from a business asset point of view, we know how to design the projects in many African countries, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. We've seen toll roads. Some of you in the room have worked on some of this, South Africa, that are working well. Transportation today is a big issue. Suez Canal, is in trouble because of the crisis that we have there. The Panama Canal is in trouble because of climate. And so with these kinds of risks, the cost of financing for transportation is going up. And that's why we need institutions, and we say this in the IEG report, the Singh Summers report, MDB resources become very important to be able to blend, to be able to lower the cost of capital. So the capital exists. The capital is just having trouble moving to where we need it the most. And so we need to find ways of bringing the cost down for it to move. We also need to, very, very important, use domestic resources as well. Leverage pension funds, leverage sovereign wealth funds in those countries, because the big issue is that we are charging energy prices to the consumers in local currency, but we're paying for the investment in foreign currency. The One Campaign did a very, very good report that showed that for every 1% increase in interest rates in the United States, low and middle income countries had to pay $56 billion more of interest rates. So the exchange rate risk is quite high. And so if one can imagine taking away that risk, you can see how the financing starts coming. The other issue is around financial regulation. Today, if you invested in exactly the same project in India versus investing in Senegal or Gambia or Mauritania, you will pay 49, you will have to have 49% more liquidity coverage, which means you'll have to keep more resources in case something happened, as opposed to if you did it in London where you only kept 25%. So the cost of capital becomes quite expensive when you have these kinds of financial regulations in the Basel III regulatory framework, for example. So that's why capital is expensive. But the World Bank, MIGA, is just putting in place, a fantastic new guarantee scheme on the one roof, which is, I hope, going to also reduce the cost of financing substantially by providing guarantees and blending in and hopefully raising our mobilization ratio from what it is today, which is quite low, to 1 to 4.
Vera Songwe, thank you so much. Following the money and helping us find it as well. Chair and founder, Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. Vera, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Solutions for green and efficient logistics. The panel is standing by. Let me tell you who's on the panel. As you hear your name, panel, please come and take a seat. Mr. Enver Iskut is the Deputy Minister of Transport and Infrastructure from the government of Turkey. Max, please help find our panelist. Mr. Srinivas Enamandram is the Joint Secretary of Logistics for the government of India. Please take a seat. Any seat apart from this one. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Appreciate you. Mr. Neo Majato Motiani is Minister for Transport and Public Works for the government of Lesotho. And Ms. Maria Constanza Garcia Alacastro, Vice Minister of Infrastructure in the Ministry of Transport for the government of Colombia. Please take a seat. Our keynote will be presented by Camilla Jane Holzer, the VP of Maersk Shipping. Thank you so much, Camilla, for starting off this session. Welcome.
Thanks to the World Bank for having me here, and a big good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. So I come from Maersk, a leading shipping and logistics company. And with some 90% of global trade moving by sea, I thought it would be relevant to share something about what are the key trends that we are seeing in global trade and logistics. And I can say that actually a lot is happening. For the first time in 25 years, global trade is predicted to grow slower than the world economy. We are also seeing shifting trade patterns, with the east-west trade becoming less important and other trade routes growing in significance. We also continue to see disruptions happening to global supply chains. So the disruptions caused by the pandemic have been widely reported, but since then, conflict and geopolitical tension have regrettably caused a deteriorating security situation for maritime shipping. And once again, the vulnerability of global supply chains has been demonstrated. 2024 has been no exception. We started the year with attacks on commercial shipping, transiting the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, critical arteries for international shipping. And this has forced ships to go around Africa and adding some 13,000 kilometers to the route between Asia and Europe, adding costs, delays, and might I add, also increased emissions. Trade and military conflict, however, are not the only factors affecting global shipping and logistics. A less publicized threat to supply chains comes from climate change. Climate change poses not only a very serious, but also a very long-term threat to global trade and logistics. We are already seeing how supply chain disruptions caused by hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and other forms of increasingly extreme weather are affecting the global economy, with large sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing bases being impacted. We are seeing draft in the Panama Canal, another critical choke point for international shipping. And in the future, we will see sea level rise begin to inundate ports and other coastal infrastructure and transportation networks. This will have long-term implications for global trade, and mitigation efforts will require an immense amount of resources and be extremely costly. Disruptions and climate change are therefore causing many companies to look to improve resilience in their supply chains. And this underscores the need for logistics providers to offer more reliable supply chain solutions. At the same time, there's a quest to simplify and make global transport and logistics smarter and more sustainable. So this is what we are focusing on in Maersk, investing in technology, resilience, and green transportation solutions. So my first key point is that global logistics is changing, and it's changing for good. Let me speak more about the green transformation of the shipping industry. So while climate change is a serious threat to the planet as a whole, as I mentioned, climate change will also directly affect trade and be a long-term disruptive force in global logistics in the future. Global shipping accounts for approximately 3% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So while the industry is a big part of the problem, the positive angle to this is, of course, also that it can also be a big part of the solution. So decarbonizing our industry can really make a change, and it's therefore imperative that it happens, but it requires strong regulation to make it happen. And that's my second key message. Let me tell you a little bit about our decarbonization efforts at Maersk. So in 2018, we embarked on a journey that has aimed to transform a whole industry and bring Maersk's emissions to net zero by 2040. This is a commitment that's validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative, making us the first in the shipping industry to achieve this recognition. Getting us to net zero relies on 4 pillars. First, we have to get the new ships that can actually sail on green fuel. Then we need the green fuels. Then we need to get companies, our customers, to be willing to support this. And then we need strong regulation to create the right incentives. We now have some new ships, and we already actually have some in operation, and more coming online this year. We're also securing green fuels and have just signed an offtake agreement for green methanol, which is 5 times the global production of today. And for customers, we are seeing increasing willingness to pay something for green solutions, as companies need us to help them decarbonize their supply chains. But stronger regulation is still imperative. Green marine fuels are much more expensive to produce than fossil fuels. And if the cost gap between fossil and green is not closed, the green transition will simply not happen. So a key element to this will be, 1, to get a global greenhouse gas pricing mechanism that closes that gap. And 2, we also need to get a global fuel standard mandating the uptake of green fuels. The International Maritime Organization, the IMO, is the body that decides on such regulation for global shipping. And it so happens that the IMO forum, where 170 nation states are meeting to have the key discussions on these crucial topics, is actually happening this very week in London. So my colleagues and the rest of the industry are present there, urging member states to develop ambitious measures. So literally the time to act is now. It's not next month or next year. It's actually now. And what an opportunity you can say this also is to actually make change. And then in addition, having the whole industry backing the change. That's actually quite unprecedented. And that leads me to my third and last point about financing the green transition, which is key. And here it's also where the World Bank could play an important role. So basically, we are creating a whole new industry, the green marine fuels industry. And this requires intensive capital investments. At Maersk, we require 20 million tons of green fuels by 2040. And that translates into 30 to 40 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity, 80 to 100 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, and approximately $100 billion for Maersk alone. And this may sound like a lot, but with an annual 800 million tons of CO2 from traditional fossil-based shipping today, a global greenhouse gas pricing mechanism, even at a quite low rate with no real inflationary impact, would actually be able to close that financing gap well before 2040. You'll see that in a minute. But what we also need to ensure is that the money collected through such a global greenhouse gas pricing mechanism not only closes the gap between fossil and green, but also supports the financing of the energy transition, not least in developing nations, allowing those countries to leapfrog their energy transition and become the future hubs of green marine fuels. Because many developing nations are well placed from a resource perspective to produce such green fuels, and that in itself represents an opportunity for development in the form of high-skilled jobs, innovation, education, and so on. Unlocking private finance for green global logistics requires collective action and innovation. Nobody can do it on their own. The challenge is not just securing the financing, but also fostering a conducive environment for green investments. And this is where the World Bank can play a decisive role. We believe that any global greenhouse gas pricing mechanism needs to include a strong financial element of a just transition, securing a substantial collection of funds. And we believe that the rightful distribution of such funds should not lie within the IMO, which would require enormous amount of administration, but should be handed to organizations such as the World Bank, who has decades of experience in securing that funds go to the right places. So what is it that we are concretely proposing? So Maersk, along and united with the rest of the industry and the World Shipping Council, have just put forward a proposal at IMO addressing all these issues that I've just outlined. We call it the Green Balance Mechanism, and I would like to share with you what this is about in the video. Thank you.
Eight out of 10 things around you come by sea. Shipping moves 11 billion tons of goods yearly and is responsible for 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Today, green fuels are 3 to 4 times more expensive. The only way to change is scaling green fuels production, making them as cheap as fossil fuels. To level the playing field, regulation is essential, and the green balance mechanism can be key. How? Well, the GBM is a technology-agnostic measure that will take the extra cost of green fuels and spread it across fossil fuels, balancing the price out. The GBM will be proportional. The higher the emissions, the higher the fee. The greener the fuel, the more it receives. It will grow progressively as we approach 2050, starting at a lower rate by 2027. Emissions will be measured across the life cycle and not only what comes out of the funnel. So, funding will go to solutions that really address the climate challenge. Policymakers can also add fees for funding IMO RD&D projects and climate mitigation in developing countries and emerging economies, a vital basis for just transition. The GBM is good public policy that will make the price for all types of fuels the same. Now is the time to revolutionize a whole industry and together build a greener future. Let's leave the gray era behind us. With the Green Balance Mechanism, we can do it.
Thank you, Camilla, for getting us started in this conversation. What I found fascinating, Camilla, is that literally all of your co-panelists got out some paper and started writing notes. Should we find out what they wrote down? We should. All right. This is not the start of a huge conversation panel. I'm just curious as to what is on your notepad. So, let us start with Minister Motiani. What did you write down?
I knew I
Oh, the microphone's just ahead of you.
I knew I shouldn't have.
Too late. We're happy that you wrote
But-
something down. What
I think
came
the
to your mind?
concepts. I think the concepts that are important is the balancing mechanism and how that would work. It's also a clear understanding of the aspirations that we might have into the green fuels and what that compares to the traditional fuel and what is required to balance that mechanism.
Okay, good notes. Ms. Garcia Alacastro, what did you write down?
Bueno, estaba escribiendo y reflexionando. Hace unas
I
décadas
was writing and reflecting a few decades ago. We were talking about safe, efficient, affordable transportation. Today, we're talking about green, resilient, ecological transportation. As I was listening to Camila, I was also thinking about who is going to pay for this. And this is where we have the challenge ahead. In the next few decades, we'll be thinking about this transformation in the transportation sector. In Colombia, for example, there is a huge challenge taking into account how vulnerable infrastructure is. I was thinking about costs, about challenges ahead, about the transformation required, and the fact that these type of initiatives, for example, in Colombia, this would take decades. But Colombia today is undertaking challenges to decarbonize public transportation, to have also intermodality where it comes to transportation. We have these 3% of greenhouse gases emissions, but we still, for shipping, but we still have to decarbonize the rest of our transport. So those of us who are policymakers need to make these investments happen.
Don't turn the microphone off. Would you just pass it to your colleague just sitting right next to you? Thank you. Mr. Anamandram, you have notes.
Yeah, I have
Go
already
ahead.
noted down. My neighbor was noting down 2-3 pages. So I started noting down at least half a page.
Peer pressure.
Yeah. Peer pressure was too much. But anyway, I noted down that India is already doing a lot on this on its part for the green logistics. And though our contribution to global warming is minimal, if you consider the per capita CO2 emission or greenhouse gases, if you consider the per capita, as a developing country and our contribution to global warming is very minimal. But still, as Madam from Merckx has told, some $100 billion. So we are eyeing something on it for the India's green logistics program.
Oh, okay. Good notes. Deputy Minister Iskat, even you wrote something down there. Would you mind sharing it with us, please? I was spying on you.
Evet. Ben önce herkese
Yes, first of all, I want to say hello to everyone, and there are two issues that were part of this talk. First of all, in the global trade, as we know, maritime transportation is very important, but in recent years, especially accidents on the seas and climate-related difficulties influenced maritime trade. And my second point, and most importantly, when we look at the load mobility around the world, we see that most of it is moved on the sea. So when we look at the ecological projects here, green fuel use is an important factor. And what that makes us think is, especially for developing countries such as Turkey, they need quite a bit of economic investments to balance. We have to balance these things, and the world is changing. But when we look at maritime trade and the traffic and the accidents, our program also, what I see is railroads for us is a safer option. That's what I think. Thank you.
The challenge for particular plenary of speakers is that our actual plenary is called solutions. So if you bring up any challenges, your challenges cannot sit there by itself. They have to be challenges and solutions working together. Mr. Motiani, if you're a landlocked country, right there is a challenge if you're trying to support green logistics. What do landlocked countries do?
Thank you. I mean, not only are we landlocked, but we're actually an enclaved country in the sense that we and two other nations that I'm aware of are fully surrounded or landlocked by one country. So in our instance is the Republic of South Africa, which means that our conversations and our dynamics and our policy options are quite limited. Despite all that, we need to find solutions. For us, unfortunately, we are also a water-rich country, which we have not taken advantage of other than to simply, again, engage on a large hydro project that just simply feeds water into the Republic of South Africa. What we need to do is to be ambitious about our approach and look at a hydro future that looks at energy generations. But we've also taken the step further and say, let's also look at production of fuels. So we've set out an ambitious project called the Hydro Future for Lesotho, which clearly includes the hydrogen fuels that is as required. For those from the region in the room, will also be aware that our neighbor is also challenged insofar as production of green energy in terms of electricity, and we have a huge potential of hydro. So that's what we are seeing as a potential for ourselves. Thank you.
Ms. Garcia Alacastro, I'm thinking about it in Colombia, the green freight initiatives for road, and what is possible and what you're looking at and doing in Colombia.
Bueno, yo creo que hoy
Colombia today has a big challenge, that is intermodality. As I was saying before, today in Colombia, 88% of the country has roads. We use roads. Even though we have a geography that is challenging with 3 mountains crossing our country, most investments in the country have allowed us to have infrastructure that is important for the development of the country. Today, we are considering the possibility of moving towards rivers, going towards railroads. This will have lower costs and it will allow us to be more competitive logistics-wise. This is what we are thinking of today. Over the last 3 decades, the country has made significant investments in public transportation. $30 billion today are funding public transportation, moving things forward. Today, we are funding the expansion of our roads. We want to have tunnels and other elements that will help us have a more competitive infrastructure. The point is, we are going to fund this. The national government will support this. The challenge is, where are we going to find that financing? And this is one of the main themes here today. We want to support clean transportation systems. Public policy says lower zero emissions, but the government in Colombia today wants to have zero emissions, and rivers and railroads are going to be the main players. How can we act so that we have a cargo move not so much through our ports? How can we send 25% of cargo to go to these clean systems of transport? We are thinking about a $10 billion investment so that in the next few years, Colombia can leapfrog and reactivate its railroads. We used to have railroads that connected the ports in the Caribbean with the ports in the Pacific. We lost that asset, but that is our goal now. How, with determination, can, as public policy, support investment to move towards these more affordable and environmentally friendly systems? We also want to support cities. 70% of our population live in urban areas. We need to support public transportation. How can these systems, these clean systems, how can we support them using railroads also in our cities?
I'm going to ask everyone to not turn their microphones off and just keep the microphones on, because then we can keep the conversation flowing. Thank you so much. Deputy Minister, I'm just thinking about in Turkey how innovation and investment is working together. How does that help green logistics?
Evet, Türkiye şunu söyleyebilirim özellikle.
Turkey, I might say, is a rapidly developing country, and especially I might need to say that in the context of environmental practices, we are rapidly implementing environmental projects, and we have integrative, balanced, and sustainable transportation goal. And to this end, we are focusing on the logistics sector to provide incentives and supports to green transformation. Our whole planning is towards this goal, I might say. In line with these objectives, we are trying to engage in the necessary regulations, and most of the transportation is through railroads, seaports, as well as internal water channels. And in Turkey, we all know that most of the transportation is high road based. However, we still plan to use make the last part of the transportation with the highways. In that regard, we published the combined transportation regulation, and we are trying to abide by the conditions of the Paris Agreement. And concerning the regulation, we have, of course, innovation activities, and we also want to engage in incentive mechanisms. For example, for logistics companies, in order to incentivize them for environmental practices, we want to have them certificates for reducing carbon footprint, and we provide them with green logistics certificates. And in the efforts they carry out, if they can have the certificate renewed, this will be a sustainable effort. And that's how we will be engaging in the investments. And in the seaport operations, we want to have highest level of energy efficiency. And in that regard, we will give green seaport documents, certificates to the seaports. In this context, in the year 2015, we have initiated Green Seaports project, and we are implementing it currently. In the maritime industry, green transformation requires a significant finance, and as Turkey, we are trying to support the sector. And in 2022, we tried to eliminate the ships who have completed their economic lives, and in their place, we started building more environmentally friendly ships, and we initiated the support mechanism. And for the ships, we are providing economic support that is worth 150% of the tonal weight of the ship that has finished its commercial life. And IPA 3 program is a European tool that helps us for decarbonization in the maritime sector. And we initiated our green maritime transportation project through its help. And we aim to increase the green maritime industry. And we want to prioritize the use of electricity in the railroad sector. We are generating our own electricity, and transition into green transportation in the railroad sector, I believe, will be faster. On the highway side of things, I might say that Turkey has produced its own car. Although it is not used for transportation, in the logistical sense of things, there are electrical vehicles in place. And in the future, there will be electrical trucks, and we are trying to lay the foundation for that. And in all these efforts, we are trying to collaborate with the private sector, which is very important. And that I would like to mention separately. Thank you very much for listening.
These environmentally friendly ships. Have you seen one? Have you traveled on one? What makes it environmentally friendly?
Çevre dostu en önemlisi kullanılan bir yakıt olarak bunlar.
The most important aspect is the fuel those ships are using. But actively, I have not boarded any transformed ship so far. And in Turkey, we are engaging in research and development activities to this end. And we have several applications for incentives. We aim at reducing the fuel consumption for the ships, and we might call these new generation of ships. And there is a significant demand from the side of the applicants, I might say.
Ms. Hopsa, you appear to be writing an academic paper. We would love to know what is going on between your brain and your pen, and share it with all of us at TT.
Absolutely. So many interesting points by my fellow panelists here. So let me start with, so there's a theme around investing in technology, and as I also mentioned, we are investing heavily in technology. One thing is the ships. So we have, when we design the new ships, we also improve them for fuel efficiency. So you'll see the new green vessels that have come on board, and it's actually a new thing with the green vessels. We had the first one in September, so not many people have been visiting the green fuel.
So you have obviously been on the new green vessel.
So I have obviously been on the new, and it was a very nice experience. But the design of the new bigger vessels that are coming is also quite different. So you have the bridge and the accommodation at the very front end of the ships, and that's for to optimize fuel efficiency and so on. So there's a lot of technology on that. A lot has also been said that it's not just about the ships; it's also about the landside infrastructure and we, of course, also we operate ports, we operate logistics and so on. There's so much that can be done, and that's being done. And I would say the net zero commitments extend to all the sectors. For ports, I mean, what can policymakers do? Also, I think, I mean, for once, having sustainability requirements in tendering procedures and so on. So when you tender out concessions for ports and so on, this is a key element that can be put in there, and working together, as we also heard. There are many low-hanging fruits in terms of bottlenecks, small improvements to processes and procedures that can actually generate a lot of efficiencies. And then there's the inflationary effect that we have heard that's a big concern. That switching from fossil to green is going to be costly, and I think what the idea is from the industry with this green balance mechanism that we spoke about is actually that you can actually put, because there's so much black stuff, just a little fee on that will actually can actually leapfrog the green transition, because there's it's progressing the green fuel uptake, but for a long time it's actually a very, very small price on it.
In the last plenary session, I left the Q&A too late and I sent away disappointed people. I will not make the same mistake again. So the Q&A microphone is right there. We also have a moderator online. Please start lining up. As soon as I start seeing you, you'll be part of the conversation. I will be true to my word. Hello, sir. Please.
Hello, I'm Michael Replogel. I'm founder of the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. My question is, how do we ensure that green fuels for shipping don't have adverse impacts on land utilization? Like palm oil plantations have destroyed a lot of rainforests in many parts of the world in producing oil. How do we ensure green fuels are truly green?
Yeah, it's a very important point that needs to be clear rules and parameters for what actually constitutes green, and the biomass that you use cannot come from forestry and so on. So that's part. I think that the system is the regulations already there, and the concept. So, but it's a super important point. That's absolutely crucial.
Deputy Minister, that's a good question for Turkey as you're developing environmentally friendly shipping and ships. How do you ensure the fuel that is being used is actually good for the environment? It sounds obvious, but maybe it's not.
Şunu söyleyebilirim. Bu tabii dünya içinde.
I might say that this is a new concept, both for our country and the world, especially for the ships. The green fuels to be used, when I think about it, requires a significant investment. But on the port side of things, the seaports in those areas, for example, we can solely invest on solar energy and renewable energy sources. But the ship itself and the fuel, the green fuel that is to be used, how this should be used and how you should find the resource. And you should not be going beyond your objective. And the question was very good in that regard. And there are investments to this end. In the aviation sector, I might say there are also ambitious goals that are in place. That sector requires significant investments as well. When you have a look at the commercial activities, the balances require an incentive for the investments to take place. And for the ships, it's the same thing. In the seaport you are to go, you should have the possibility to find these fuels. This requires another investment. This needs to be studied in depth. However, you have to start from someplace. For small yachts and small vessels, we see electricity being used. But in the future, I believe this sector will further enlarge.
How big is your green logistics budget, and is it enough? And then how much more would you like?
Evet, lojistikte
Yes, in the logistics, when we have a look at our country, we are making significant investments, especially in the transportation sector in Turkey. When we have a look at the highway transportation, 85 to 90% of transportation is through the highways in Turkey. Turkey is a country surrounded by seas. However, when we have a look at the demand, the ratio is much lower. But our biggest investment at the moment is on the railroads. It is environmentally friendly, it is economical, and we are working on that. Ministry of Transportation identified a budget for 2024, and 65% of this will be allocated to the railroads. And it aims at cheap and environmentally friendly approach, with solar energy, wind energy being prioritized, with electricity and total signalization in place. So we are trying to make the investments towards that goal. As for figures, the budget allocated to the railroads is 70 to 85 billion Turkish liras. If I make the US dollar conversion, it is around 25 to 30 million dollars of an investment at the moment for 2024.
Thank you for sharing your budget. Online, we
Thank you for sharing
a question. Please
your
go ahead.
budgets.
Hello, moderator. Let's start with the sustainability logistics of turning the microphone on.
Yes, the mic is on now. And
okay, good.
In fact, we
Go
have
ahead.
quite some activity online. I guess this is a topic which does not only affect economies as a whole, but individual people's lives. And this is how the conversation online really went. And if I could summarize what people were kind of busy thinking around, then it's really how do we reconcile between the imperative of making logistics and freight transport greener, and at the same time maintaining cost-effective transport. And then, of course, speaking to the subject of this panel, how can climate finance or finance in general reconcile making transport greener and providing a reliable, resilient, and cost-effective service?
That really speaks to the whole conversation we've been having since the beginning of this plenary. Thank you online for contributing. Hello, yes, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. My name is Alyssa Siddiqui. I work for a group of NGOs, the Electrification Coalition, SAFE, and our Coalition for Reimagined Mobility based here in Washington, D.C. Question is, this is a really important conversation. Freight is on track to, by 2050, have the leading sort of emissions in terms of global emissions. We haven't talked yet about digitalization and the effect of that in terms of the industry. We've released a report that says we can reduce emissions by 22% by 2050, incorporating digitalization at the level of the ports. Green fuels, green transportation, really key, but the digitalization piece is key. And just curious, these great opinions and thought leaders, how you're looking at that as an additional solution to the freight problem of now and the future.
Thank you. Excellent question. Can I just see by show of hands, who is working with digitalization? Anybody else? All right, please start.
That's a very good thing. The digitization is an essential part of logistics. As far as India is concerned, we have launched one platform called ULIP, that is Unified Interface Logistic Platform, where more than 35 government agencies are connected to that applications of the FASTag, GSTN data, and the vehicle owner data. Everything is connected. So whoever are linked to that, any company who has registered with that, he'll be able to get all the information about the various services along the all the government services. And second thing, what we are doing is a logistic data bank, which is the tracking of the containerization all over India. So as soon as the container arrives in the port, an RFID tag is placed on that, and then it is continuously monitored throughout when it goes to the CFS, ICDs across the country. And then this data is used for the big data analytics like dwell time, what is the turnaround time, and what is the average speed that it takes from the port to the nearest toll gate. So that helps us to is a sort of feedback mechanism for the various ports to improve their efficiency.
Oh, please go ahead.
Sí, complementando y entendiendo también un
Just to
poco.
add to that, and to give a better understanding about the situation in Colombia, Colombia went from logistical transportation costs that could be approximately 12% of the final product and of the price. So 18% of the final value of an item from sales is represented by logistical costs, but only 35% in Colombia would be the transportation costs. The other 65% is made up of other activities. In other words, the trade, facilitation costs, and how can I bridge supply and demand. And here we could use these information systems, connecting data. And this is one of the potential opportunities for us to become more competitive and more efficient. In the case of Colombia, if we connect the center of the country with the Caribbean ports, would be about 4.5 days of travel. That's about, and 15% of that is the transportation costs. Then it's not simply what we're doing today is, of course, we're trying to make the transportation greener, but we're looking at how can we better coordinate efforts among all the stakeholders, all of the port activities, container operations. How can we bring all that together, the logistics and infrastructure costs, so that we can become more cost efficient? So that's another area that we need to focus on to become more effective, more efficient. At the same time, from here to 2050, we can achieve the 2030 goals of reducing 51% of CO2 emissions, and by 2050 we can reach that carbon neutrality goal. And it's not just working with increasing energy, but also how can we become much more efficient in our logistical operations.
Thank you.
Thanks for the panel. I'm Kristina Klopotowski from Catalytic Finance Foundation. And the main thing I'm curious about to hear more is I hear a lot of alternative fuels to decarbonize the maritime and shipping industry. And I'm curious from your different contexts and perspectives, what's the appetite for electrification at ports? So, the role of shore power and so on as one of the measures to decarbonize this industry, including, what could be the challenges and opportunities? Thank you.
Okay, let me go to Ms. Holzer first and we'll come back to you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good question. For ports, I mean, you kind of nailed it. Electrification, that is the key way we see it to decarbonize. But actually, so everything we do now and all the ports that we build, they electrified. This is a key thing, and the equipment that we are shifting when we're shifting equipment, that's also electric. Electrifying ports, of course, also has then the ability to use technology in another way, and also to automate some of the processes that will come to optimize in our sort of big transshipment port hubs. We have now installed digital twins, for example, that allows us to simulate operations. Simulate bad weather, simulate other contingencies that actually allows us to be much more reliable, because we have tried everything before the ship actually arrives and have taken into account potential obstacles and so on. So it allows us to be much more efficient, and then it allows the green. So it goes hand in hand, so to speak.
And now Andra, go ahead. Yeah. Microphone's right in front of you, actually, on that table.
Hello. Yeah. As far as the electrification,
it's working.
As far as the electrification is concerned, India has around a route kilometers of around 67,000 route kilometers, and around 99% of the track is electrified as of now. I think this is one of the highest electrification across the world as the percentage of electrification. If you consider other countries like China and all, they're only 60%, and Russia maybe around 65%, and US, I don't know, very minimal electrification to 2 to 3%. Whereas India, we have gone for almost 99% of electrification, and by December of 24, we'll be able to have the whole 66,000 route kilometers across the panning India completely electrified. And then we have got dedicated freight corridors, eastern and western dedicated freight corridors of around 4,000 kilometers, which is dedicated only for the freight movement to enable us to have basically boost our economy. So we are going in a big way towards all these electrification projects. And also we have recently launched the EV policy, and we are working also towards the electric vehicles in our country.
Mr. Motiani, Minister, it's so nice to have so many transport high-level experts on the stage together. I'm sure you do talk to your colleagues in different parts of the country. If you had one question for one of your panelists here, what would be the most interesting question that you would want to ask? And everybody goes, well, that Minister for Lesotho, he knows his stuff. What would you ask? Or what would you share? Maybe you already have the answer.
Thank you. The one issue we would ask the panelists in here to share with us is what one needs to do to frog jump a landlocked, poor rail network, difficult topography, to create a efficient logistics system that is pivotal for the growth of the economy. If I put that into context, in our situation, we have the fact that we need to produce and export to other countries. In particular, we are exporting under AGOA to the US. But our limitation is that we are bearing the cost of those exported products of about 20% attributable simply to the logistics and not other factors. Thank you.
Minister, who would you like to ask? I feel like if you get the right answer, you would have a promotion. Who would you like to ask? Who do you feel amongst your panelists is qualified?
A number of people to ask.
Yes, who?
The finance mobilizers in the room.
Yes, okay.
The experts in doing the transition into a decarbonized fuel systems, and ultimately the operators of the shipping lines like my colleague here.
You are going to be inundated at lunchtime because all of those people will come to talk to you. I guarantee it.
I have an assistant to help.
All right. I think you might need a couple of volunteers as well. That is such a good key question. It really sums up one of your key challenges there in Lesotho. This is a very brief question, and I'm going to try and get you a quick answer before we all break for lunch. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you. As, one of the things that the United States has been struggling with is electrification and the green transition, especially in our freight rail sector. I know that India has been doing a lot to deal with some of the challenges that we claim to have. I was wondering if you could give some advice to us or Europe as places that are that have built out, and you guys are now tackling new challenges. What are some of the things that you would help us to learn from your experience?
What would you tell America?
Please hire us.
That was not. I wasn't expecting that answer.
Anyway, we'd like to collaborate with you because it's our honorable Prime Minister vision. Basically, all the whatever the progress is, the speeding of the election. We believe in basically the three mantras that he has suggested is speed, skill, and scale. So basically, we went after first the skilling our people. That is a capacity building exercises we started, and we started mobilizing the companies which can help us in achieving the objectives. And I'm proud to state that we Indians are very hardworking. So that also subscribes to that. And the second, the third most important thing is we allocated a lot of budget, lot of our capex on the infrastructure projects. So we had one mission that we should complete electrification by March 2024. So that was our vision, and everybody followed it. So if you make a vision for America, I think it will be done.
Interesting. So interesting. I'm just wondering, Ms. Garcia Alacastro, any advice for America from what you've learned from your work? Anything? Strategy, logistics, efficiency?
Bueno, Colombia
Well,
está recorriendo.
Colombia is also going down a journey that still has many challenges ahead of them. And I think today the greatest takeaway is with regards to the most efficient energy source, the most effective energy sources for different modes of transportation. We're all talking about electrification efforts. And to make that leap requires to go through other energy sources so that by 2015 we can reach that carbon neutrality milestone. Advice is, if you were to ask me what are the challenges and what can be done, I would say that getting that political will is important. There's an awareness today, and it's an issue where there is a global consensus vis-a-vis the need to take immediate steps in order to achieve a decarbonization of the economy. The problem is we continue to face barriers. In Colombia a few years ago, we started talking about the need for electrification of the automobile industry, and yet years later we still face various barriers, supply barriers, price barriers, and obstacles. So I think the political will is essential in order to make that progress in breaking down barriers. In Colombia, we're looking at creating a fund for technology access and to try to achieve at least 1 million vehicles, electrified vehicles. That needs to go step in step with the seeking of finance to cover that price gap that we still see between zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles. So how can we achieve that transition? What is the most timely and pertinent technology when we're talking about making that quantum leap in shipping, methanol, hydrogen fueled ships? That's why it's important. We need to know exactly what our end state is. We need to know the costs, the availability, and achieving that energy transition. But there has to be that political will, that willingness, so that we can continue to face and address these challenges. including the taking on the costs involved in energy transition.
Speakers for Plenary 2, I thank you so much. The audience will also thank you. Plenary 2, thank you. We are going to break for lunch from now until 1:45. The World Bank cafeteria is one level down on C1. Enjoy your lunch and enjoy the stimulating conversation I know you will have after Plenary 2. Thank you.